Welcome to the Smith and Rowland Show. Let's join our host, Alan Smith and Jeff Rowland.
Well, welcome everybody to the Smith and Rowland Show.
Hello, Jason.
Hello. If you're just now joining us, make sure you head over to the kingdompropheticsociety.org. Join up. Join the conversation. Jeff is always there to take your questions. He loves to talk about theology and whether women can be pastors or not. And
wow, so you're right out there in the water.
So all of you,
I don't even listen to him anymore.
So you're in the water.
But
I don't even listen to him.
So what we got to talk about? I know y'all had mentioned the.
Tell me about y'all's services. Let's start that way. Tell me about y'all's services.
That's what we're going to dig into here. Alan was talking about the. I didn't get to hear his whole sermon, but he's talking about the coronation.
Okay, cool. Kick it off there.
That whole British evil thing that they do over there.
Kick it off there, Alan.
Well, I would love to. I watched it, and I know a lot of people get, some kind of caught up in all of that stuff.
Anything that has to do with the royal family, there is a demographic of people over here that it just seems to intrigue in some way.
And but I wasn't one of them, but I did watch most of it. I mean, most of the ceremony.
Why was you not intrigued?
Well, it's just there was something about it that bothered me. And I don't know why they've been doing that for hundreds of years over there, but something about the coronation of, which I didn't realize it, but Prince Charles is actually the head, I don't know, patriarch, if you would, or something, of the Anglican Church.
Which is what the coronation's all about.
It's what it's about, yeah. And that
what I watched was...
He's the head dude then of the Anglican Church is the way I took it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he had the Archbishop of Canterbury there, I think, is the actual dignitary that's over the Anglican Church there. But it's something about, and we got a friend of ours, Tim Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we call him a friend. We talked to him a couple of times. Want to have him here on the show sometime. And he wrote a book titled something in a cup of tea. What
Antichrist in a cup of tii.
Antichrist in a cup of tea. Yeah. And back in the 80s, perhaps, he wrote that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The Antichrist in a Cup of Tea by Tim Cohen. You can go online and you can actually purchase it on Amazon now for about $450 a copy.
Yeah, that's right.
$450 for a paperback.
What?
Yeah, it's out of print.
It's out of print.
Oh,
everybody's wanting it because he gave his reasoning on King Charles he believes to be the Antichrist. Well, and it sounds ridiculous, I know, but if you if you get into it, and
it's intriguing to say. It's an intriguing concept,
to say the least.
Yeah.
To say the least, it is very intriguing.
What was if you were to summarize? Oh well, go. I don't want to interrupt you, but if you were to summarize what your thoughts were in watching what you watched about the coronation, what was the impression? What was that first impression you got of what you were witnessing?
Well, my first impression, I don't know, Jeff. I'm 70 years old, and I still have a lot of questions, I guess you could say, as far as the faith's concerned. I think I have more questions now than I ever had about different topics. I'm pretty much, I don't know, I just have a lot of questions. And when it comes to what I was watching, the King Charles there being put over the Anglican Church, or they call it the Church of England, which is the Anglican Church. You have the Catholic Church, Catholicism. You have Orthodox, which came out of the Catholic Church around 1037 or 57 or somewhere along in there. Orthodox, they had what they call the Great Schism. That they divided over. They split. Orthodox split off of that. Then the which is what is considered the Orthodox. And then you had the Protestant Reformation, 1500, right at it. Martin Luther. Then it split off of the Catholic Church. So you had several splits there. Anglican being Protestant. So the Church of England is actually my understanding. I could be corrected, but my understanding is it's Anglican. and it would come out of the Protestant arm of Christianity. And so, but you still got the Catholic and you got the Orthodox. Now, the thing that's, I don't know, it's just so intriguing to me, to use your word there, is that you see Rome in 312, of course, instituted Christianity as the religion of Rome.
Yes.
And then in 476, then Rome fell. So you're not talking, 150 years after that.
Yeah.
Well, part of Rome fell. It was the west of they call Western. We've discussed it before, even in podcast a little bit, that you had a Eastern Rome and you had a Western Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Western Rome fell in 476 thereabouts, and then when the Catholic Church though still was there.
Yeah.
In Italy, there in Rome, even though they were taken over by this big group of the barbarians. I forget the name of the group, but they were called barbarians. So they were taken over 476 and they fell. Now you had Constantinople, though, was considered the capital of Eastern Rome.
Yeah.
So you had the West, which was the city of Rome. Then you had, in which it was called Catholic, and they had the Catholic faith. Then you had Eastern Rome, which had what was called Orthodox.
Right.
And so, but the Orthodox lasted another 1,000 years. And that's what we call the Byzantine Empire, I think it is. So when you see Byzantine Empire, it's actually, they still saw themselves as Romans, but yet Eastern Rome, capital being Constantinople. And so, but what happened with that thing in Eastern Rome or in the Byzantine Empire, the emperors, the East or the Orthodox had patriarchs. They didn't have popes. So that was one of the big splits at the Great Schism. Is two main things. One is they fell out over communion bread. Mm-hmm. One thought it should be leavened, the other one thought it would be unleavened.
Nowadays, it would be gluten-free versus.
It would probably be gluten-free.
Yeah.
It would. And so somehow or another they fell out over that, and that started the schism. But then the Orthodox, they weren't really embracing. You had a crowd that didn't really embrace the Pope. But yet in the Eastern Rome, there at Constantinople, they created a hierarchy of a patriarch, which was the same thing as a Pope, basically. Right. Now the difference, Jeff, is that patriarch was appointed by the emperor. So you had an emperor of the Byzantine Empire, and that emperor would always place who the leader of the Orthodox Church was. Yeah. And then you had in the West, you had, of course, the Pope. But East Byzantine lasted another 1,000 years. They finally fell at about 1500 is when they fell. So why does this make any difference? Then you had what, of course, is called the Anglican Church. So here you got England, the Church of England. When you see Church of England, Anglican, Protestant, you see that this King Charles is saying that they've placed him as the leader over the Anglican Church or of this Protestant arm, I guess you could say. With the Orthodox is the one who influenced Russia. Yeah. Now, the West calls itself the first Rome. The East called itself the second Rome. Guess who called themselves the third Rome? And even today, Russia. Mm-hmm. So Putin sees him, because the Russian Orthodox is what went into Russia, kind of set up their whole social structure, everything.
That's right.
And so Putin is seeing himself as restoring the Orthodox way of life. He sees himself as a protector, I think I heard him say, right, of the Orthodox.
Of the culture of the Orthodox.
Exactly. And
so he's used that word in speeches about the culture of the Orthodox Church. And he that's one of the first politicians in the last few years that I've heard use that. The reason that I was asking you about what was your first impressions on seeing the coronation is that for me, I watched clips later after it was over, and for me, it was I think we kind of shared a similar thought in that I can't say that I felt dirty, but pretty close.
Something about it just doesn't feel right.
Pretty close. There's something that don't sit right. There's a union being heralded between the government and the church, and that dates back to where you're talking about
forever.
That's where you get the idea too of separation of church and state.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up.
Well, it also gives rise
to
it also gives rise to some doctrines because and some philosophical ideologies because Origen dating back all the way to I think it was 81, 85 dating all the way back to then, political correctness was a part of the rise of denying a rapture of the church because of what threat that was to the government, even of that day. So there's evidence going back into early Christian history that political correctness was alive and well then. And we think it's a new thing. It's not. It's always, this has been the ploy of Satan and a strategy of Satan against the church ever since the church started. And it's caused a shift of doctrinal beliefs in some ways,
What? So because I do not know this part of history at all, and I've heard one thing and I've heard another thing, but a lot of Orthodox Christians that I've watched and stuff, they kind of the big thing for them is they call themselves the first church, Orthodox churches, and
everybody sees themselves as successors of Peter.
Yeah, that's right.
The 12 apostles.
And so I just wanted to let's bring a little bit of clarification to what we're actually talking about when it comes to Orthodox and Catholics in the beginning of the church. I don't think majority of red blood Baptist Americans are going to understand exactly what we're talking about. A lot of our understanding, it seems, it stops with Martin Luther.
It does at the Reformation. Yeah. It definitely does. Well, let me go back to what Jeff was asking. What was my takeaway, which might even bring some of an answer to that. My takeaway is that King Charles. We've got somewhere or another there's going to be an Antichrist show up on the scene.
Yeah.
Okay, he's not going to show up with horns and a pitchfork.
That's right.
That's not what he's going to do. He's going to be an Antichrist. He's going to look like he's acting like Christ. So we know that he's going to come through probably I know a lot of people like to say it's Arab, but it's probably Catholic, Orthodox, or the Protestant movements.
Yeah,
of the faith,
without a doubt.
That's just
without a doubt.
That's the way me and you are
absolutely
think anyway.
Yeah.
So when I see a King Charles, also knowing what Tim Cohen had said, and then when I was reminded, I think as I was watching that, some things I've heard him say, I'm like, my land, that guy's it's a perfect fit. And now that's making a big statement.
Yeah.
King Charles could he be the Antichrist? But yet his position in world governments, his position in the world, in the United States here, we might say poo-poo on King Charles like he's nothing. But that's not true.
It's not true.
No, he is a global figure to contend with that's basically accepted in all forms of government globally, except for probably Russia and China, perhaps.
But let me ask you a question about that because we know if you study the book of Revelation, if you study the Old Testament writings of Daniel and other references that makes references to the Antichrist, the person of the Antichrist, from a religious standpoint, he's going to be a unifier. To say that the Antichrist is going to come from Catholic, Anglican, or Protestant, I think that's right. because after all, he's trying to replace Christ.
He's trying to replace Christ.
Okay. And we know that from the description in the Word of God, he's going to have political power. He has to have political power. So it is that union between, that's the thing that, to use Trevor's term from last week, freaks me out. Okay. I get freaked out a little bit over that simply because there was a display yesterday of a union between the government and the church that was seen very clearly. And the head of both the government and the church is seen in this one man, King Charles.
This is one man, yeah.
That is a mirror image of what we understand about the characteristics of the Antichrist. There's no doubt about that, that's going to be true yet in the future. What kind of practical implications does that have here? I still say that the church is in many ways being relegated down here in America or being pressured into political correctness. That's what the conformity is all about, and that pressure is coming from the government, and it makes me just makes me wonder: are we seeing what's going on there about to happen here in some form? And you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think the groundwork's already laid for that. So that's interesting statistics about Great Britain. This was reported by Newsmax. 4% of the population of Great Britain attend church.
How many?
4%.
Oh.
Yeah, I was looking at that this past week, Jeff. I mean, it's lower than almost any other country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the UK, they're at the bottom of the barrel.
Yep.
Like it is. Like,
that's right.
Did you say 4%?
4%.
I was watching this graph where somebody animated the church growing in different countries.
Yeah.
And the UK was at the bottom. Like every other country. I'm like, man, we need to send missionaries to England.
Yeah. Well, and 27% deny God, that there is a God. And the odd thing about that is, in America, we experienced last year the greatest decline of church growth in our history. You know, there was a net loss of 1,500 churches in America last year.
That's awful.
So consider that. That's taking into account all the startups, churches that are starting, and those that closed their door. That we still experienced a loss of 1,500 churches. I'm saying that in a lot of ways, what we see happening there seems to find its way here. And for a long time, even in the political, well, not for a long time, it's still going on. In the political world, there is this move to try to make us more like European nations.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
That's part of the progressive left's agenda. So I do think in watching that was part of my take. It was almost like you're watching the fulfillment of church history in its earliest forms being displayed before your very eyes. And then what is the net result? The net result is 4% go to church.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean.
So y'all want to look at it? I was doing a little research here while I was sitting here. And if you just Google the Antichrist, just see what Google says. It brings the first thing that comes up is a painting from the 12th century by a nun. And I pulled the image here so we can take a look at it. But that is the Antichrist on the left. She depicted him as a king. Yeah. I thought that was.
And it's really, kind of, really. Yeah, that is. I know. I sort of.
I mean, imagine if his hair was a little grayer. His fingers were a little bigger. I'll stop now.
Well, I know there's I mean, what we're doing is speculating here, of course.
Yeah.
But I can feel something.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
But do you see? I mean, she depicted her. She wrote or she illustrated this pretty famous little book of art. But that was her depiction of Of the Antichrist. I thought it was interesting.
That's
And that's like
very
the first thing
interesting.
that pops up on
That's the
Wikipedia is that painting or whatever, what drawing.
Wow.
I was
Thought it
just
was
looking up here. King Charles is the sovereign over 14 Commonwealth realms, in addition to the UK. His Majesty is also head of the Commonwealth itself, a voluntary association of 56 independent countries. This is an important symbolic and unifying role. In other words, and I looked that up a little further, these independent countries, they have as much as 150 countries that the UK still actually owns the country. It's when they kind of went their own independent ways, they gave it to them kind of like a long-term lease.
Yeah.
And so in reality, they still own the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, that's another topic within itself. But to see how widespread is my point.
Yeah.
That, and there again, what is my takeaway from yesterday is I know being an American, a king doesn't mean much to me. But I know on the world scene, for some reason, it makes a big deal. It's a big deal.
Well, and that leads me to this thought, and I know we're about out of time in this segment, but it leads me to this thought. I wanted to ask you about this. For all of our lives, and dating back to however long, the American political system has basically been used to keep the rest of the world in check.
Correct.
Through various means, whether by military or whether by economic strength or whatever, we have kind of kept the world in check. And because of the weakened position we now find ourselves in, the world is left to their own ways without any governing strength or political power influence from America. And so you see that taking place. And, say whether it's good, bad, or indifferent that we are weakened on the world stage, that's up to everybody's opinion. But with that said, somebody feels the vacuum that we've left.
That's right.
And it's not even debatable, have we lost our influence on the world stage? That's not a debatable thing. That's already happened. So who feels the vacuum is the next question. And it looked apparent to me and obvious to me that in the coronation, and it's not, you can look at something like that, you can watch something like that, your emotions can get involved, and then you can rush to an emotional judgment. But if you look at it for what it is, and you evaluate things from what they are, it really does appear that we are looking at the successor there of political influence around the world that America used to hold.
Yes.
That's the way it appeared to me. That was one of my takeaways.
During the coronation, it is supposed to establish him that he embraces the cardinal beliefs of the faith.
Right.
And he said yes to all those things. But he's also said yes, not in the coronation, but before, months before, that he embraces all religions and want to bring them all together.
Exactly.
But yet yesterday now.
Exactly.
So I'm just saying there's two different things happening here.
I watched a clip
Did you watch
actually
a clip of that?
Of when he said that he embraces all faiths. So, and we know that the Antichrist is going to have to do that.
But the coronation over his position of the Anglican Church, that's not what the whole thing's about. The whole cotton
You
picking
can't
thing.
do that and then be the head of
that
it.
and do that.
All right. Well, and so thank you for joining us for this segment of the Smith and Rowland Show. Like I said, if you're just now joining us, head on over to the kingdompropheticsociety.org and join the conversation, the donate button.
That's right. That allows us to get out here on the radios.
Yep. When you click
Radio
that button.
Land.
Thank you for joining today's Smith and Rowland Show. You can check out our website at kingdompropheticsociety.org and our daily unplugged podcast at smithandrowlandshow.podbean.com. You can also join us on Amazon, Apple, or Spotify.